our culture is really a death cult of pushing things like abortion and transhumanism and transgenderism and all these different things where it's like it's taking away of who we are as God's creation and who we're intended to be.
Liquid death. So they actually bring a witch in, and that witch prays death over the water. Like prays over the water and brings spirits into the water and does this entire process that someone caught on camera.
Wow, I did not know this.
Yep. And then they actually just came out with a new whole thing where you can join the Liquid Death program membership.
Yeah.
The way to become a member is you sell your soul. And there's, I think, probably over 500,000 people that have sold their soul to Liquid Death.
That's the lie that's being told to everybody. Because vaccines make billions and billions of dollars, but not only that, they create customers for the rest of their life because they have all these sicknesses and issues beyond that. So whenever information is coming down from the top, you don't question it because in the way you're trained to think that like if you don't know it, then nobody else knows it. Like it's not been proven, it's not safe. And if you think that vaccines have been studied well enough, then why would you go out and study it yourself? We also have like the 66th overall quality of health in the world, and we spend the most amount of money on health. And so I think there is a financial incentive, obviously, to keep people sick, but...
Dr. Austin Lake is a renowned medical expert, and he specializes in helping people find the root cause of their disease and dysfunction within their body. In this episode, we dive deep into the main causes of disease and what could be preventing men and women from truly living a life of vitality. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. We got to hang out all day in golf, which was not something that I do on the regular.
I mean, it really didn't show. You saved us a few times.
Yeah, right. No, I appreciate it.
Golf is really hard.
It is very challenging.
Yeah, keeps you on your toes the whole time, which is why I like it.
You've been studying, you've been really focusing on mastering golf, you said, over the last year. And
mastering was your word, but yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just being somewhat proficient, not embarrassing is what I'm going for.
Yeah, they were saying, so I looked up some statistics. So the 10,000 hours is for complete mastery. So highly proficient or high proficiency, like very high, better than most human beings is about 2,000 hours.
Okay.
So most people hear the 10,000 hours and they're like, man, there's no way I could ever do that.
Right.
No, 1,000 to 2,000 hours will get you better than most people.
Well, it's kind of like even with a lot of things in life, it's like if you put 20 hours in, you start seeing a lot of breakthrough in whatever you're trying to accomplish. And so that first initial step is really important. So sometimes even 20 hours is a good step. But
yeah. The challenge with golf is anyway, we're off on a tangent, but so I'm super excited to have you on the show regarding we're going to talk a lot about health. You're a doctor and some pretty important. You make some very impactful shifts and changes for human beings through the work that you do. And so we really haven't had a health expert or doctor on the podcast yet.
Awesome.
Had a lot of guys in the fitness space, the business space, marriage, family, all that, but not in this arena. Cool. So very excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's start out with what's an area of health and nutrition that most people overlook, but that's very impactful to their health?
Well, kind of like we were saying, during our lunch meal, whatever that was today, I think a lot of it stems from a lack of belief that our bodies are capable of healing, and in that the right environment will allow for a body that can really thrive. And so people kind of get set up in this mindset that things just happen to them and it's a result of their genetics, and it's just things that are out of their control. And I think it creates this mindset that allows people to just kind of drift into what's convenient and not taking ownership of their body and really viewing it as a breakthrough that I had recently was kind of just realizing that like this isn't even my body. Like this is, in 1 Corinthians 6:9, I think when God's talking about our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, he's saying that this is it's mine that I've given to you, and I think realizing that we're stewarding something that's not ours, just like if you were to borrow somebody's car or somebody's golf clubs, like you would probably take a little bit better care of it than you would if it was your own. And I think having that mindset, that visualization for me at least, has been super helpful, just to be like, no, like I'm going to be intentional with the things I put in it, the things I do, the things I think and believe, because it really matters. And I think having that initial belief is, as we we're kind of saying before, it kind of leads into these other areas of health where it's like, you got to pay attention to your exercise and the things you eat, the supplements you take, the things you think, the air you breathe, the water you drink, like all those things affect how you feel and how you can operate. So it's really critical.
So you've helped thousands of people through your work. What would you say are the top reasons people come to you? Like, what are they dealing with?
So that's primarily women, is where I've kind of landed. But as a whole, like I was saying before, it's really the family is who we're trying to help. But a lot of the women that come to us initially, it's because, they're tired, they can't lose weight, they have brain fog, they just don't feel well. And, when it comes to a female specifically, their hormones are a lot more variable. Like it's a 28-day cycle. We have a 24-hour hormonal cycle as men.
Explain that.
So, we have a typical circadian rhythm that we follow as men, because testosterone is very stable. It doesn't change a whole lot throughout the course of our life. We don't have much fluctuations in kind of the hormonal cycles that we're going through. Females, you have 3 different phases over the course of 28 days that your hormones are drastically changing through each of those typically 7 to 14-day time periods. And so women are a lot more susceptible to feeling poor, like they don't feel well because they're starting the month off with lower energy and they become a bit more anemic. They feel a little bit more drained. And so our culture as a whole is not catering to the fact that if you have a female who's running the household, taking care of the children, working a job, and then expected to exercise and fast and calorie cut and do all these things, if you're not timing up with her cycle, she can have a lot of symptoms just from poor management of her month, basically. And so as a husband, it's one of those things of like, okay, honey, what do you want to do this month? Like, or what do you want to do this week? And she's like, hey, like, let's, go on a hike. And you're like, okay, like, let's do that. But if she's like in the beginning of her cycle, you're like, well, maybe we should do a little bit of a lesser, less intense hike. Or if she's exercising, maybe encourage her to do a little bit different strength training methods, or maybe not do so much cardio. If she's like not really feeling it and not in the mood because she has low libido biologically because of her hormonal cycle, like having a little grace for that and kind of realizing like that's going to kind of peak after day 7 through day 21, where that's going to be a lot more feasible for her to feel like she would want to get in the mood and kind of get active. But if she's not in that state, kind of having some grace for that and realizing where she is and kind of understanding her cycle would be helpful, I think, as a husband to kind of consider that.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
No, I'm right now. I'm kind of wild right now that I am completely, I feel like I'm a decent husband, but I'm very unaware. I'm aware of one cycle.
Sure.
Like I know when
There's
she
a cycle.
Oh yeah. I know when she hits her period and however, I'm not aware of really what's happening hormonally. I don't think a lot of women even know what's fully happening.
No, they really don't. And a lot of women, I mean, I shouldn't say a lot, but a decent amount of women don't even track their cycles. So they kind of know like when they could potentially get pregnant at ovulation, but they don't always know when they're about to start their period. Like they'll get, signs of maybe cramping and things like that. Maybe they don't feel so energized, but a lot of women, it can kind of sneak up on them. They're like, oh shoot, like I didn't know it was going to happen already. It's already that time of the month. When there's a lot more that's happening leading up to that time period that you can be mindful of. And I think intensity of exercise and activity is really important as a baseline, just to kind of consider that at the beginning of the month, she's going to be kind of here with her intensity. As she kind of goes through ovulation, it's going to be kind of like a bell curve to where she'll be able to handle a little bit more in the middle of the month. And then as the end of the month comes, like kind of taper off with the activity and intensity.
Not the actual month, but the end of her cycle.
End of her cycle, which depending on when she's lined up, 28-day cycle. So
28, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So the beginning of their cycle. That's really interesting. Do you have that documented somewhere?
I created a post on that at one point. Yeah. And it's, it's in my,
where I can see that visually. Like I'm a visual guy.
You can just, you could even just Google like, female hormonal cycle, and it would pop up and show you those different hormonal levels. But if you kind of just picture a bell curve at the middle as a higher intensity or like higher ability to handle intensity, you can kind of just picture that like bell curve throughout the month or throughout her cycle.
Since we're talking about hormones, I was reading an article that since 1981, there's been a 1% decline in the average testosterone of men over the last, since 1981 up until now. So massive decline. What do you think is causing that?
So if you look at, number one, the first thing I think of is if you look at when we introduced glyphosate into our food system, it started really getting sprayed on food back in like 1972 was when it was primarily being, Roundup is what's being used. And so the way glyphosate works is that it actually will.
So that is a Roundup.
Yeah.
That's the base chemical in Roundup. Okay.
Yeah. So that was 72. What that does to the human body, what it does to the plant is it actually, let me back up. So they have to create GMOs, genetically modified organisms, so that they can spray glyphosate on the crop so that it can not kill the crop, but it can kill the weeds around the crop, right? And so what that does is it demineralizes the weed. So it takes away and strips out the minerals that would then allow it to grow and to live. And so you have to create a crop that's genetically modified, first of all. So the food is coming into a human body that is, our bodies may not be all that used to. So your immune system can then start to create an attack against some of these things you're consuming because it's not accustomed to it, right? And so that's what the main issue is with gluten, is that gluten's become hybridized. It's no longer the same kind of protein structure. So our bodies are taking it in and identifying it as a foreign invader. And that's why if you go to Italy and places like that, you'll see that people do well on eating pastas and bread because it's an ancient grain. Our healthcare system in the United States, or our health in the United States, I think that was the first problem, is the food that we're consuming is, number one, it doesn't have nearly the nutrients that it used to have. I mean, if you look at the soil depletion of minerals and vitamins that's coming in through the soil that used to be there, I mean, it's like 30 to 80% reduced in these veggies and foods that we're consuming, just because we're consuming genetically modified organisms, and the soil itself is, because of monocropping, doesn't have the nutrients that it used to have. So there's that component with our health, with testosterone. You have to have fat in your diet. There's a huge fat is bad idea back in the 80s and 90s, even early 2000s, where people were told not to consume fat because you'll gain fat, which is a complete fallacy. It's not even close to true. You need fat to make cholesterol, and then you need cholesterol, which is the building block of all your hormones. You need cholesterol to make testosterone, and then you need omega-3s to convert these hormones into the right hormonal pathways so that you can actually make good testosterone and not just convert it into bad androgens or even estrogen, which happens to a lot of men. And that's where you start seeing even worse problems for men's health specifically. So there's a lot of things that come into it: deficiencies, inflammatory responses, and then just the fact that I think there's other components, maybe in terms of this is a little bit more fringe, but more things like candles in your household, like having soy candles or burning fragrances all the time and breathing that in, like that has an effect, creates a weak estrogenic effect in all people.
So you're saying having and burning candles will feminize men, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Don't have candles. You don't need a candle, guy. You're good. But so there's like beeswax candles and things like that you can do that aren't going to be having that, but that's not nearly as big of a lever that guys can pull or people can pull that would affect that. But primarily, I think it's the food.
Yep.
And then, then our whole culture has been centered around this idea that, that cholesterol is bad, that salt is bad, that fat is bad. Like, we have all these kind of these misnomers that are kind of creating a reaction within the culture that to respond a certain way and to exercise a certain way and eat a certain way. And I think all that is just affecting testosterone and hormones in general.
Yeah, I think it's the amount of women, the amount of men that are dealing with brain fog, with depletion of energy, that are dealing with disease, the amount of disease that's out there is just absolutely out of control.
Yeah.
And that's why I love what you do, because people can go work out more, right? They can spend more time in the Word, reading the Bible, but at the end of the day, you got to take care of this vessel.
Yeah.
And the way to take care of this vessel, I believe, primarily is through, there's a lot of environmental issues, but through our nutrients and like what we eat.
Right.
This what is one of the most important, one of the critical things that we can really help people step into is eating properly.
Yeah, and it's a huge part. I mean, the problem is that food provides such comfort to people, right? And like we eat to reward ourselves after a long week or a hard day. We drink alcohol because we deserved it, or we want to treat ourselves. Or, we stay up late and watching Netflix, and we disrupt our circadian rhythm, and so we wake up the next morning, we drink a bunch of caffeine, and we spike our cortisol. We reduce our insulin sensitivity, and that can make testosterone drop as well. And so there's a lot of like chain reaction things that happen just from having poor discipline in your day and your structure of when you're saying no to certain things. And even something as simple as just not eating after 6 o'clock at night can really help to improve insulin sensitivity, which insulin's job is to take this energy you're ingesting through carbohydrates, through sugar, and using it for production of energy in terms of ATP, which ATP is that active form of energy via your mitochondria that actually helps to fuel everything that we do. And so people take food in, potential energy through the food. If it's bound with a bunch of chemicals and maybe the calories are good, but you don't have, you have this inflammatory process coming in through the food because of the chemicals, and then maybe you're eating at the wrong time of day, it's too late at night, maybe it's before bed, your insulin's gonna become less sensitive, you'll be more likely to store it as fat. And so that fat storage will then turn into triglycerides, which basically that's potential energy that hasn't been used. And your body is not broken. It's not doing that by accident. It's actually doing that by design, because your body is going to be thinking that you're in a state of survival. because you're having all these stress responses coming in. You're eating a certain way, or eating these foods that are causing this this stress response potentially. And what your body's thinking is like, okay, well, we may not have food for a while. We may go into a period of starvation. We may have a period where we have to fight, and we might need to store this for a later day. So your body's actually doing it by design, because that's how we've survived at this point. Like the fact that you and I are all here is because our ancestors were great survivors. And so we have really good survival mechanisms that will get us to survive, but not help us to thrive. And thriving is a totally different conversation. That's where the sex hormones all come into play. And that's what people always think about when it comes to losing weight and being fit. But you can't outwork your in the gym a bad diet and high inflammation and bad circadian rhythm. Like you can't do that. You can't take supplements to override that, because that's just not how the body works. And so people kind of get caught up in this idea that more is always better, and sometimes less is more. You know, when you're trying, especially for females, if you're trying to actually lose weight, sometimes doing less is going to help you get there.
Let's talk about the circadian rhythm for a moment. There's a lot of people that are unclear on the best, like the best way to be in alignment with that and to maximize that part of the natural part of ourselves and the way that we operate. So what should we be doing?
The first thing you want to do is not drink fluoride in your water, because fluoride is going to calcify your pineal gland, and your pineal gland is what interprets daylight and interprets these cycles throughout your day. And so when your eyes are seeing sun, it realizes, okay, it's daytime. Let's make insulin more sensitive so we can take this energy and take it and convert it into ATP. But if it's nighttime, you're also getting that signal to your brain to like, hey, let's make more melatonin and decrease cortisol so that we can actually start to get into a state of rest and sleep. So people have to kind of understand that, fluoride is, in my opinion, it's, I think it's a waste product of aluminum. And I think it was coming through a lot of people's, through farmers and things like that. It was getting the soil and kind of getting our water systems. But more than that, I think this is like, I'll get back to circadian rhythm, but this is kind of an important thing to think about. What fluoride really does, and I think this is where I think there's some level of intentionality maybe as to why it's there. But fluoride, I mean, we've seen the reports on how it reduces IQ. And really what it does is your consciousness is also being affected. And so your ability to have critical thinking and not just be a pawn and just kind of be told or do what you're told. Having a healthy pineal gland will allow you to kind of think deeply and to challenge, these ideas that maybe are against the grain, against the narrative. And so many people I think in our day and age don't think those way. We're all kind of just zombies watching a TV. We're just kind of mind numbed all the time. And, we saw it with COVID. We see it even now, like that's happening even still, like even after everything that's already happened, there's still people out there. You're just like, how could you not wake up to all the things that have been happening? Like, how could you not see it? Well, like, I think physiologically they can't see it. Like, I think there's a block there. So reducing or getting rid of fluoride in your water is a hugely important thing.
Do you think that's the primary source of fluoride intake is through water right now? Or is there any other areas?
It's in a lot of things. It's in medications, it's in foods in some ways. But yeah, water is the primary one. And it can only be absorbed through ingesting it. It doesn't get absorbed through your skin, thankfully.
What's the best way to get a water test for fluoride?
So there's like my TAP score is a pretty good.
What is it?
My TAP score.
My TAP
score. I'm not affiliated with
my
them.
TAP score. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. They'll test your water and you can just send it off to them. They'll tell you what's in there. But if it's tap water, you can assume that there's fluoride in there. Toothpaste obviously has fluoride in it.
So we have a reverse osmosis system.
Yeah.
We've always had them at our houses. Is that a great way to?
Yeah. The only caveat there is just you got to add minerals back to your water.
Yeah. My wife does that. I do not.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah, definitely add the minerals back to it. I like Baja Gold, Celtic sea salt. Those are all good options. But if you do that,
I take a teaspoon of the Baja in my water.
Yeah.
So I don't add minerals to water every time I drink from reverse osmosis, but I do a daily teaspoon of the Celtic salt.
Yeah. That's probably pretty good. I mean, you could maybe do it a couple more times throughout the day, but that's really a good option.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people, I mean, there's a whole salt conversation too, but getting back to circadian rhythm, so taking the fluoride out is really important, but fluoride also depletes iodine, which is really important. So I was talking about, you're asking about the hypothyroidism thing on the golf course. Like, if you deplete iodine, you have a hard time making T4 hormones, which is helpful for, that's what your thyroid is trying to make is T4, and then you convert that T4 into T3, and then you get your T3 into your cell, and that's what helps with metabolism and energy. But fluoride will also deplete iodine. And a lot of our culture doesn't get nearly enough iodine because we've taken that out of our salt as well. It used to be ionized salt, not the thing anymore. So having iodine via seaweed or a supplement to kind of ensure that you're getting enough of iodine is really important. But also chlorine is another halide, which is a part of this whole iodine and fluoride and bromine family. They're all competing for absorption. So chlorine is in your regular water as well. That gets absorbed through your skin. So if you're taking showers or long baths, like all that's getting absorbed in your body. And so that can be a big problem if you're doing that often, or if you're a big swimmer and you're doing that a lot. You really need to make sure you're taking iodine, and that you're also
so iodine counteracts that. And by the way, if you're listening to this podcast, this is not for the person that does not desire to improve physically or mentally or even emotionally. This is for the person that's like, hey, I would like to learn how to take care of my body better. Sure. Right. So this is a really important, critical information. Just giving that little notice out there, like this stuff is the real deal. Yeah. So regarding chlorine in the pool, so my thought, we have a saltwater pool, which basically means that the saltwater cells convert the salt into chlorine. So even though it's a saltwater pool, it's still chlorinated by the salt. But
sure.
So what is it okay to go swimming, and is that stuff absorbed into your skin? Right, I would believe so.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that question, but I guess if its end product is going to be chlorine, then that would probably be a problem if you're doing it a lot. But but the nice thing is if you take like selenium is really helpful to kind of protect your thyroid. It's also a trace mineral, so you can get it through the Baja Gold and things like that. So taking that, or taking like a thyroid supplement that has iodine and tyrosine and selenium is really helpful if you have a thyroid problem.
How would somebody know if they have a thyroid problem?
So, I mean, most women do.
Most women have a thyroid problem.
Yeah, to a certain extent. And the problem is, if you look at a conventional blood panel, the reference range is pretty wide. And so if you go to your doctor and say, hey, like I'm having fatigue, or all you have to do to get that panel drawn is just tell your doctor, I'm tired and I'm having some brain fog, like maybe my hair is thinning, and they'll do a thyroid panel. That kind of triggers that from an insurance perspective, and so they can justify that. But if you do that, you'll see a reference range, and typically, most reference ranges is like 0.5 to 3.5 is what you look for on a TSH marker. Optimal is more of like a 0.8 to like 1.8 to 2. And so you can kind of see that even though you're still in the range, you could still have like a suboptimal thyroid problem. And then if you wanted to go even a step further, you could check iodine, you can check selenium, you can check all these things specifically to see if you're deficient. But most people have some issues there, especially women. Women have more issues than men.
Yeah, I mean, what would be the symptom? So if somebody is having a thyroid problem, so loss of hair or thinning of hair?
Thinning of hair, yeah, you could just, even brain fog, slow motility, so gastric motility, if you had like constipation a lot, obviously low energy, difficulty losing weight, kind of a lot of the common symptoms you see, it's usually connected back to the thyroid. But the problem is your thyroid is a master gland that's responding to everything around it. So it's responding to your environment. So if your environment is deficient, or it has toxicity issues, or you're consuming gluten, and that is causing an autoimmune response to then go after and attack your thyroid, all those things are things that you can fix. So we help women reverse thyroid problems all the time, because it's not all that complicated once you understand like what's driving it. But in terms of conventional medicine, you'll get Synthroid or levothyroxine, which is just T4. And that T4 is synthetic. And the crazy thing about it is a lot of women that have issues with thyroid problems, they also have issues with gluten and dairy. And there's research that has shown that if you cut out gluten, there's about a 90% reduction in symptoms. If you cut out dairy, there's like an 80% reduction in symptoms, because those foods you're consuming, again, they can cause issues with your actual thyroid tissue that your immune system then identifies as a problem. So your body then goes after and attacks your thyroid tissue, and then you start seeing a reduction. And these enzymes known as TPO and TG, which you can check those as well, but that's what you'll start seeing, like Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune hypothyroid condition.
Yeah, the amount of autoimmune diseases
skyrocketing.
Are skyrocketing. I mean, are you following that at all as far as?
Oh yeah, I mean, we primarily what we help our clients with is autoimmune issues, and so but yeah, I mean, women are 5 to 8 times more likely to have these issues than men. Man,
it's brutal. It's so sad.
Yeah, and
I hate seeing that. Obviously, my wife, right, Jessica, she's dealing with her autoimmune disease and Lyme disease, and it's just a very difficult process, because very rarely is there a clear way out. And so it's for autoimmune, and there are ways, right, which is how you support people. But I always wonder why it is that way, right? Because men are just, in general, they don't necessarily take better care of their bodies,
right?
However, women tend to be more susceptible to disease.
Yeah. So women perceive stress about 40% more than men.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge factor. And we were kind of alluding to this in the golf course too, but men's role in this whole thing of offloading some responsibilities from their wife and understanding kind of what they're up against. And women are also more likely to seek out care, but they're also, they have this caregiver syndrome where they give of themselves to where there's nothing left, right? And so, I mean, my wife right now, like we have a 7-month-old baby, and I've seen it in her all the time. Like she's constantly she has hardly anything left in the tank, and she's staying up late with the baby, and baby's crying. She goes and feeds him and, holds his hand and does all this stuff. And I'm just kind of like, man, can we get that baby to be quiet so we can just go to sleep? And she just had like, I think there's this other part of her that's like, she helped to make that, him in her body. And she has like a deeper level of connection to him than I do. And I think with all the kids, she feels that way. And so I think God created him that way on purpose. It's not a mistake, but knowing that, like, we have to then be extra considerate of offloading those responsibilities.
Really important. That's a lot of times we refer to the way men treat women as being donkeys.
Yeah.
So being donkeys in the way that men will continue to pile stuff on, and the wife will continue to bear that burden. Right. So if the husband's not taking care of the schoolwork, the wife will take care of the kids' schoolwork. So if the man isn't showing up, the woman bears that responsibility. And the downside is stress. Women operate differently under stress than men do. Like we have broader shoulders. We're built to hold more stress.
That's true.
And I don't think guys realize that. That's why I desire for my wife to not have to work. Right. I don't want my wife to have to work, because I know the level of stress that sometimes those things can have on her. So if there's a way where she can have less stress, man, I will do everything, and I will apply all the stress necessary to be able to provide for her, so she can have less stress, because I know it affects her body. Like I see it. I actually see, and I see when she's stressed out, and I see how it negatively affects her. And so I think a lot of guys are missing that point. They're out being goofballs, messing around, hanging out with their buddies, getting wasted, or sedating with alcohol while their wife's handling dinner and handling the kids and handling everything. And there's a big gap there, and that was me for a little while. Not necessarily sedating with alcohol, but there was a point where I would just disregard tasks that needed to get done, and then they would end up piling on my wife's plate, and then she would be stressed. And again, it did take a toll.
Yeah, I'm sure. And this there's also a good aspect to think about in terms of, there's this really, I can't remember his name, but he wrote this book called White Knights and Reviling Wives. And I listened to a podcast, he was talking about it, but he was talking about how, a lot of the the pastors, the men in the church, we have like this like white knight mentality of like men are bad and women are like poor, things, everything's been done to them and they're victims and all this stuff. But there is also this like reviling wife component to this that we have to be mindful of within the relationship of men and wives. So it's like women are going to want to take leadership. Like if you look at Adam and Eve, like that was kind of the whole passivity thing, right? Like Adam like let her make that decision because he was passive, and he kind of just gave that responsibility to her. When the reality is, like, God put us as headship over our household and over our wives, and not in a dominating way, not in a dismissive, unloving way. Like that's not at all what it is. But being a true leader is hard. Like it's very difficult to love your family, love your wife well. And it's hard, I think, for women to respect their husbands, especially when, number one, we don't always earn it or deserve it. Like sometimes it has to be given even though it's not earned. And same thing with our wives, that we have to love them even though they may not deserve it. But I think not having that dynamic within a relationship, at least from my experience, like that's where I think a lot of this responsibility thing gets passed on, to where it's like, yeah, you don't respect me anyway, so just you take that. Like I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go do it. You don't seem to care anyway, so I'm going to go hang out with my buddies and be a goofball. But like I think if there is this love and respect component, I do think that it would be a lot more impactful in the family and also the health of the men and the women.
So interesting how this is full circle, right? The way we respect and love each other directly plays into our health.
It's hard,
right, and our well-being. So it's all a critical part of this. Is where living a holistic life plays a key part, right? And we talk about the 4 pillars: faith, family, fitness, and finances, right? So faith is that key foundation of everything, and then we have family, the relationships, right? Loving, respecting, just the way we operate. And then we have fitness or our health, like all these things play in, and then also our finances, right?
Not a big deal.
Us being able to take care of our families and be able to provide great food for our families. Right. Like it all ties in.
Yeah. It's hard stuff. I mean, I think that's where there's a lot of grace that can be had for wherever you are in your walk of like healing. there's a lot of grace there because it's not easy. And I think especially in our culture where it doesn't encourage these kind of behaviors, it encourages, feminist behaviors and effeminate churches and pastors and just like masculinity toxic and all this stuff, and eating healthy food is like a conservative thing, and it's like, no, eating healthy food is a human thing, like loving your wife is a human thing. And I think our culture is really a death cult of pushing things like abortion and transhumanism and transgenderism and all these different things, where it's like it's taking away of like who we are as God's creation and who we're intended to be. And like that to me is like the biggest like if you talk about root causes, like that's the biggest root cause as to why our culture is in such a confused state, because like we're getting it from the top down all the time of like, this is how, life should be, and forget that stuff about the biblical stuff about what God teaches you. And like, is God even real? All these different questions they raise to kids and parents. And it's just like, there's so much of a death cult because like God is life and they hate life. Like they hate God. And I think that's really what I see in terms of healthcare, is that it's not even that people are ignorant from the top down. I think there's truly a culture that hates life, and you start seeing it when you see how they use pharmaceuticals and how they use. We have the worst infant mortality rate in the world. We have like, I think probably the second or first maternal mortality rate in the world. Like, so moms and babies die more often here during birth than any other place in the world. Yeah, like we have. Like if it's not number one, it's number two. Like it's up there.
Wow.
We also have like the 66th overall quality of health in the world, and we spend the most amount of money on health. And so I think there is a financial incentive, obviously, to keep people sick. But more than that, when you really start looking at this kind of depopulation agenda that you start seeing from these world leaders and the World Economic Forum and places like that, they really are pretty outspoken about we need to depopulate and the world needs to be smaller, and we have too many people, and we need to control that. And we control it through vaccines, we control it through abortion, we control it through poor health, and it's really, it makes me furious when I think about it, because if you really kind of boil it down to what the root of it is, that's what I think it is, and that's where I feel like it's a fight worth fighting for sure.
Man, that's so good. Yeah, it's interesting as we move away, as our culture and our society moves away from God, we start losing just basic decency.
Yeah.
And morality, which is what you talk about life, right? You said they actually hate life. I think about it, and we get desensitized to some of these things, right? So there's the water liquid death. And so it's super interesting. So I don't know if you're aware, but there's a video that shows them praying. Oh, have you heard? Oh man,
I don't think I've seen this.
Oh, it's wild. So liquid death, they have
the actual company?
The actual company that makes the water, blowing up, huge company now.
Yeah.
So they actually bring a witch in, and that witch prays death over the water, like prays over the water and brings spirits into the water, and does this entire process that someone caught on camera.
Wow, I did not know this.
Yep. And then they actually just came out with a new whole thing where you can join the liquid death program. They're like they're membership.
Yeah.
And to become a member, the way to become a member is you sell your soul. There's actually a written document that you have to sign. It explains all these things about how you're giving rights to your soul. And there's, I think, probably over 500,000 people that have sold their soul to liquid death to be able to have some of these free privileges. It's just,
that's crazy.
It's just a twisted, weird way. Like, even the name liquid death, like this obsession that, hey, we no longer care about life. It's just this, life is meaningless if you don't have God.
Right.
And as a Christian, right, we know our body's a vessel.
Right.
We know our body's very important.
Right.
Yet when you walk away from God, like our body's just this tool that can be used for whatever, and whatever sin is out there. So it's a real, so I see the death cult is a real deal.
Yeah. And I think again, know thy enemy and kind of know what you're up against. And I like, it's not it's not even a left versus right conversation. Like it's just a life versus death conversation. And I think again, it gets back to like what our purpose is as Christians and all that.
What supplements, back to actually, before I dive into that.
Yeah.
What would you say is leading to the allergy pandemic? Right. So I have personally a few different allergies. Right. One of my kids has egg allergy, a nuts allergy. Jessica just got a milk allergy, egg allergy. Right. I mean, it is just it's an absolute people. It's not talked about enough, but I feel like it's a full on epidemic of the amount of people that are sensitive and allergic to things now.
Yeah.
So what do you think is leading to that?
Well, I mean, really what it is a hyperreactive immune system. That's kind of their response that's happening, but that doesn't justify like why the immune system is hyperreactive. So kind of what I was saying before with the GMOs and kind of these things that are coming in, like the way they're changing food doesn't help that situation. But kind of like we were saying before with the eggs during our meal was, how they use a lot of these egg-based proteins to put into vaccines and different vaccines as adjuvants, so that they can then deliver it and they can kind of create some kind of immune system response. The problem is if you had a vaccine that had that in there, or you had something else in your vaccine that would then trigger immune system response, whatever was in there could then also become like a sensitivity to your immune system. To where if you're eating it, your immune system is like, hey, this is a foreign invader. Like we should get this out and go after and attack it. So you can see that component. Same with the peanuts. That's kind of a big issue with peanuts. Same kind of thing. And then you also just looking at, the vaccine schedules increased like threefold. It went from, like 18 shots to like 72 shots over the course of, like 11 years in a child's lifetime.
Ridiculous, man. It's absolutely out of control.
And so that's going to create more of this immune system hyperreactivity. And then you have other heavy metals in there that create more problems that we were kind of alluding to before. But that's primarily my estimation as to why that's happening, but I don't know for sure.
Do you vaccinate your kids?
No,
not at all.
No, we used to. We our first two, we did like a modified delayed schedule, and we did that also. Did a couple of them, and then once I started looking into the stuff more, because even at that time, I was more of like a skeptic of vaccines at that point, and so that's why we're kind of like, we'll do a couple. And we only did a few, but our last two, we haven't done any, and I don't plan to. If you look at books like Turtles All the Way Down, or learn from people like Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, I believe her name is, or even RFK's book he did, I doubt you'll vaccinate your kids any further, because a lot of the vaccines that they're testing, they never test them against the placebo, the salt pill, or a saline solution. They're testing them against other vaccines. And so you're getting this comparison of like, well, this is the vaccine that we had, let's just say for polio back when, and now we've kind of had some new variations from that time on. Let's test the new vaccine versus the old vaccine and see if there's any change. And so if you're comparing like a vaccine to a vaccine, but not to a placebo, you won't really get good data on its safety and effectiveness. And so it's a really manipulated way to test it and to say it's safe and effective. But that is a big lie that's been told over and over again. And just like the Nazis did back in the 40s, like if you tell a big lie over and over again, people start to believe it and don't question it. And that's what's happened to vaccines, is like if people say vaccines are potentially harmful, people are like, vaccines are safe and effective. It's just like a robotic response. It's not even like, well, how do you know? If you ask a lot of doctors, like I interviewed Dr. Joel Warsh, he's a pediatrician out in LA, and he's like one of the first ones in this conventional pediatric world who's started to really ask the question of like, are these safe and effective? And so he started doing his own research, and he's just like, your mind would be blown if you realize like the research is such garbage that like you can't say it's safe and effective, because they don't even know that. But that's the lie that's being told to everybody, because vaccines make billions and billions of dollars. But not only that, they create customers for the rest of their life, because they have all these sicknesses and issues beyond that.
Well, I remember going to get our son vaccinated, and we told the doctor, we said, hey, so we want to spread out the vaccinations, right? We don't want 3 or 4 or 5 or at this one time.
Right. That's smart.
Can we spread this out? And the doctor, they fought us.
Wow.
Like they were very actually visibly upset that we wanted to spread out. So they're like, hey, so you're not doing this vaccine? We're like, no, we're not doing this vaccine right now.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Do you know the consequence? I mean, they pushed back so hard. It was really interesting. So I feel for parents that are confused in this space, like, should I vaccinate my kids? That when the doctors are so pro-vaccine, it's it's very difficult to push against them. You feel like a bad parent pushing against these vaccines, but it's a real deal. They push these things so hard, and they have, again, there's good reason of why they push these things. It's not for the health and benefit. Maybe some doctors truly believe in them. Yeah, but there's definitely incentives.
Well, and I would say most doctors, probably 95% of them, truly believe it's safe and effective, and it's a good thing. It's not even a malicious intent. Like, the incentive is behind getting a vaccine. Like, there are bonuses that you can get from certain programs and things like Blue Cross Blue Shield offers them, but that's not enough to for them to then be that aggressive towards it. Like, they're making enough money already, but they really truly believe, because the problem is that
How could they be so naive though? I mean, when you really look at the data and the information,
they don't look at the data.
It's so ridiculous. It's a bunch of chemicals, right, that they're inputting into a 6-month-old baby,
Yeah.
1-year-old baby. That's like, it makes common sense would say that it's not ideal for their little system.
Yeah. So there's like silos in healthcare and in science, to where it's like you're in your silo and like you're an expert in this field and you have your standard of care that like you're supposed to stick to. If you go beyond that, you could get accused of malpractice and you could lose your license and all this stuff. So you stay in your silo. As a doctor, you're looking at like, okay, so like information's coming down to me from the top, from the experts in the field. And so the experts are the people, the scientists that are studying these things and are actually in that field doing that. Me as a clinician, I'm not studying it, but I've been trained as in a hierarchical system of like, they're this expert, I should take their word for it. I'm an expert in this field, they should take my word for it. And so there's all this kind of like narrow-mindedness that occurs. So whenever information's coming down from the top, you don't question it, because in the way you're trained to think that like, if you don't know it, then nobody else knows it. Like, it's not been proven, it's not safe. And so the first objective is to do no harm, and so you're not going to do anything that's going to cause any harm. And if you think that vaccines have been studied well enough to say that they're safe and effective, because that's been the narrative, then why would you go out and study it yourself and do a deeper dive when that's what you're told? And why would you distrust that? Because you're the expert, or they're the expert. So it really creates this big issue of just an inability to critically think for yourself, and most people don't have time to go research it properly to actually understand what's involved with all this stuff. But it's complicated, Well,
I mean, there's complicated and there's significant consequences.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Specifically around vaccines.
Yeah.
I believe, and I believe you believe that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Damage that's done.
Yeah.
The autism
rates.
Yeah. Rates. Talk about those for a moment.
Yeah. I mean, you can read about this and they'll say, well, we have broader spectrums of classification to determine autism. We're doing more testing. There's more awareness, all that stuff. And that is probably true. But when you go from like 1 in 2,500 to 1 in 35, it's not just that. Like, there's other environmental factors or potentially vaccine factors that are contributing to this neuroinflammatory problem. And it's not that far of a stretch to think that injecting something like aluminum and mercury that can combine with each other, and some of these vaccines don't even have aluminum in them anymore. Like, they've kind of gotten rid of some of that stuff, but they still have these heavy metals, these other toxins that are known to be problematic for the gut health. And if you understand anything about gut health, you understand that there's this enteric nervous system that can occur between your gut and your brain. There's this axis that they all work upon. So just like you can get a leaky gut, where you can get things past your intestinal permeability, this barrier that your body creates, you can also have a leaky brain barrier to where you can start getting things passed through and it can get in your brain. And that's where you can start seeing this neuroinflammatory problem, especially with like aluminum that comes through environment, but also potentially vaccines. So it is a problem for sure.
What would you say for people that are looking to level up their health, right? Maybe they're in a preventative way, but also maybe they're experiencing some different symptoms. Like, what's a good process? Where do they start?
Yeah, so what we do with our clients is we'll start them on a elimination diet. So we want to figure out what foods they're consuming that would be contributing to this inflammatory problem or this immune system hyperreactivity issue. So we walk them through elimination diet. We get them on some foundational supplements, like obviously vitamin D, D3 with K2, magnesium, glycinate, typically omega-3 fatty acids, which you want about 600 milligrams of EPA and DHA per dose if you can. There's some really good brands that offer that. And then you want to make sure, I typically want people to be on a B complex, just because, as we were saying before, with MTHFR, that genetic polymorphism.
Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah.
So you've spent some good time with Gary Breck, and he does a lot of, he shares a lot about the MTHFR gene.
Yeah.
So so good. Explain what that is and explain how that could be affecting people.
Yeah, so it's passed down, so that truly is genetic, and so about 60% of the female population has MTHFR. I think maybe about 30-40% of the male population has it.
Gene mutation.
It's a polymorphism. So so it's called a SNP, to where basically the gene doesn't function like it should, and what that means is that you don't methylate, and so methylation is a process that's happening like 300 billion times a second, or it's like it's ongoing all the time. So you have to methylate. If you don't methylate, you die. But methylation is also important for like detoxification, DNA repair, producing neurotransmitters like serotonin, helping to, with mood and sleep and thyroid health, like all these things. It's super involved in that. And so if you don't methylate, you don't detox. And so usually people have issues consuming like folic acid. And as we were saying before, like if a lot of things are, being sprayed with folic acid, or it's a synthetic form of folate, which folate's great. Methylfolate is better, but folic acid's synthetic. And so it's in a lot of foods. It's in a lot of prenatal vitamins. It's in a lot of multivitamins. You'll see folic acid. If it's in any of your supplements, just toss it out. Like it's really, yeah, like okay. That's one thing that I try to avoid as much as I can, because I do have MTHFR. And so I take a B complex that's methylated. And so that basically means that it's like the most absorbable form of B12 and folate and B6. And so that can help you to detox and make energy and all these things. So people can really see like a life-changing experience just by taking a methylated B complex if they have MTHFR. And you can go get a test through Quest, or your doctor. Well, your doctor may not want to or be able to, but you can get it done privately if you want to through your own Quest lab locations nearby. But it's a simple gene test. Get that done. You can rule it out, but at the very minimum, you could probably assume that you need a B complex, preferably methylated, and then that will help to solve that problem for sure.
Mm-hmm. Again, what's a symptom of that problem? So you're having a hard time. Yeah. What would be a symptom?
Yeah, I mean,
that has that mutation.
It could be something as simple as brain fog and low energy. It could be something as simple as you're starting to get like, rashes, or you're seeing like eczema. You're starting to see maybe even joint pain. Like you feel inflamed. You feel puffy. Like just a lot of people feel that way in general. So the first step is to get people feeling better. So like in our program, our first objective within the first month is that they feel well enough to where they can see the comparison of like, wow, like I was feeling like crap for so long, that when you start feeling better, it's kind of like this aha moment of like, wow, I didn't know I could feel this way again. And then once you start feeling that way, then we start to challenge our immune system with new foods to kind of see how they're responding. Because if they're feeling well and you bring something in, they don't feel well anymore, like you kind of know like this is a trigger for your immune system. But usually if you take a methylated B complex with these other supplements I mentioned, you should start noticing that, and those are supplements I recommend to everybody. Like I think everyone for the most part should be taking those. There's a few contraindications here and there. If you're like on blood thinners, you shouldn't be taking a ton of omega-3s, but for the most part, most people should be taking those. And if you check your vitamin D levels, if you check, mostly vitamin D to make sure you're not toxic and taking too much. Otherwise, it's pretty benign. Like you're not really going to be inducing much risk with taking those. And every human body, I think, would thrive more if they had those in their system. So that's kind of a foundation. And then from there, what we start focusing on is in phase 2 is we start focusing on like detoxing parasites and getting their gut health in alignment. Because a lot of people have parasites, and parasites, they affect your immune system they deactivate this Th1 part of your white blood cell that is responsible for pathogens and viruses and bacteria. And so this is why I think ivermectin was helpful during COVID, is because it's an anti-parasitic drug. That's a pharmaceutical drug, but it does help to kill off parasites. And so if you're killing off parasites, you're theoretically bolstering your immune system so that it can go after viruses and bacteria. But if you have a bunch of parasites, you're likely experiencing a lot more a higher rate of autoimmune issues, because your immune system is just being turned off essentially. And so some parasites can be good. Most of them aren't. Most people have too many and they're out of balance. And so we do a parasitic cleanse in that second month, but you have to kind of prep the body for that. So there's kind of some steps we have people take. And then we move them into like a systemic detox of like their liver and cleansing heavy metals and kind of going down that route. But that's kind of towards the end of it, because again, you want to make sure they're ready for that kind of stuff. You don't want to do that too soon, because people can feel pretty sick and crummy if they're detoxing too quickly and they're not ready for it. So there's some steps to follow for sure.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, we went through a detox, but yeah, when Jessica detoxes, she gets it can be intense depending on. So some people's bodies don't do as well with detox, right?
Right.
They can have rashes and a lot of stuff can end up happening. But detox is such a critical part of. Yeah, it's necessary. How often should one detox? Like do go through a detox?
Yeah, and
process.
So I always clarify in this, because we're detoxing right now.
Yeah.
There's daily detoxification where it's simply like you got to hydrate, you got to have a bowel movement every day. Like you got to sweat, you got to pee. So if you're not doing those things, like you got to breathe air, you got to breathe CO2 out. That's all detoxification by definition. But if you're doing like more of a systemic detox, like I was referring to, I think at least annually, maybe biannually. It just kind of depends on where you're at and how you're feeling. But if you're feeling feeling pretty good, I would say probably annually would be sufficient. Yeah.
And what are some supplements that people should not be taking?
That's a good question. We were just talking about this in my community group. Alpha lipoic acid is one that can pull heavy metals pretty strongly. And so if you're not ready for that, you can be pulling heavy metals. Like, so mercury in your mouth is a heavy metal. That I have one in my mouth and you get rid of, but that's a big problem for a lot of people is they have a mouthful of mercury and maybe like gold caps, and those metals can interact and cause problems. So if you're taking like alpha lipoic acid and too high of doses, it can be pulling out too much too quickly, and that can make people really sick or even kill them. And I don't know if people like actually die from taking alpha lipoic acid, but like that's one to be cautious with. There's a lady in Denver who had, she was seeing a dentist, and they pulled out too many of her mercury fillings at once and actually killed her from the off-gassing because it was just too strong.
Wow. And
so you got to be careful of that kind of stuff. And it can get trapped in your brain, and so that can cause issues with your neural health as well. But alpha lipoic acid would be one. I think people waste a lot of money on probiotics. Probiotics can be good, but a lot of them are insufficient in their active live cultures, and so they're not actually all that effective. And they're not even getting really past your stomach and into your small intestine. So
what are some good ones? Because we take some probiotics. My wife's done a lot of research on it. I don't recall which ones we take, but what are some good ones?
So this isn't technically a probiotic, but Akkermansia is like it kind of like helps the soil in your gut terrain. And so Akkermansia is a newer thing people are taking that I think is a pretty good option to kind of just allow your microbiome to kind of balance itself out. A lot of people we're starting to see are having deficiencies like completely of bifidobacterium, which bifidobacterium is kind of absolutely necessary for life. And it's also one of the things that I have on my COVID protocol, which is from Peter McAuliffe. They kind of talked about how bifidobacterium is a super important strain of bacteria for your immune system, because most of your immune system is in your gut. About 2/3 of it is coming from your gut. And so I like kind of looking at specifics of like what are you potentially deficient in by doing a stool test and seeing like, are they low in bifidobacterium? Are they low in lactobacillus? Are they low in butyrate? Or like what are they having issues with? And you can kind of be specific with taking high doses of those things. But otherwise, really what you want to focus on, in my opinion, is you want to have really good eating hygiene. Like slow down, eat your food slowly at a table, pray before a meal. Don't drink a bunch of water with your meal. It can help to affect your stomach acid a little bit to where you may not break things down as well. So you should
drink water after or before?
About 20 minutes before or after. Okay. And just sipping to help you swallow is a good idea. But yeah, chewing 20, 30 times a meal or per bite, putting your fork down, like those things that are so, again, common and basic that most people don't do, has a huge effect on your body's ability to actually break these foods down and get them into your small intestine to where they're in their form that cannot be then feeding bacteria. Because if you're feeding bacteria things that they want that promote imbalance microbiome or imbalance diversity, then you start seeing like, dysbiosis, which is just imbalanced microbiome bacteria. So that's where I would rather start with, and making sure that you have good biosynthesis. So if you don't have a gallbladder, taking things like ox bile can help you to synthesize more bile, and bile is really helpful for cleaning up your intestinal tract and all that.
Well, what does considering that a majority of our immune system, right, stems from our gut, or there's that involvement in that process somehow, what does the most damage to gut health? What are some things that people do that really damages the gut?
Taking things like aspirin, ibuprofen, having high stress, having poor eating hygiene. Nightshades can be, it's like black pepper can cause perforation in your intestinal lining. And so it can, that's why a lot of supplements will have black pepper, because it can help to increase absorption of those things you're taking, but it's actually causing like micro damage to your small intestine.
Wow.
So nightshades are one you can be mindful of. Obviously processed foods and processed, seed oils, all that stuff is going to be pro-inflammatory. So like that's never going to be good for your gut. And then really, just making sure you're hydrated. If you're not hydrated, you're not going to have consistent bowel movements, and you start getting constipated and you don't filter out toxins, and then you start getting bacteria in your colon that can go into your small intestine. You get things like SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And so there's a lot of things like that can occur. But for the most part, I think it's, probably, I think for most people, it's they're taking too many Tums or like PPI medications to suppress stomach acid, and then
what should they, so if you have significant stomach acid, what's the best, either way to fix that permanently or to temporarily resolve it?
It's actually an issue for most people. It's an issue of insufficient stomach acid, and so they're taking a PPI because when food comes in, the stomach acid's supposed to be so acidic, and it's actually more acidic than, I think we have more acidic stomach acid than like dogs. Like we have very strong acidity by design. So acidity isn't the problem. Like people have too basic of stomach acid. It's not acidic enough. So the food sits in there too long. It doesn't break down fast enough, mostly because they have poor eating hygiene, or they have they're drinking water or whatever the case is. So like that will delay the breakdown in your food, so it can't get in your small intestine fast enough. And so that starts to gurgle and put pressure on your esophageal sphincter, and that's when it opens up, and that's when you can get like an acid reflux response. But it's not because you have too much acid. For most people, it's because they have too little acidity. And so you want to make sure that if you are on a PPI, it depends on why you're on. Proton pump inhibitor like omeprazole, Nexium, these medications that people take, they pop them. Like they're supposed to be a medication that was a short-term use in case you have like a stomach ulcer, or a hiatal hernia or something like that. And so people, that was their original design, but people start taking them long-term, but they're never meant to be taken long-term because of this whole stomach acid issue. So people take them long-term because they have stomach acid, but a lot of foods can trigger, like nightshades again, or tomatoes, things like that can trigger that kind of not allergic, but that acid reflux response. So there's kind of a combination of like eliminating certain foods that can trigger that, not eating too close to bedtime, and then also making sure they're eating a calm environment, and then not drinking a bunch of water so you can actually digest it well. And then there is a product you can take if you don't have a hiatal hernia or stomach ulcers. You can take betaine HCl, which is actually betaine hypochloric acid, and so it's actually like stomach acid. So you can take that to help your body to break things down fast enough. And once you kind of wean yourself down from that product, you can get to your point where you don't need it anymore, and you can kind of get off it.
So you don't recommend taking Tums?
No, I mean, not unless you have like a stomach ulcer. There's like a really, really good reason for it, but most people know like that's not a good idea. So you want to, if you're on a PPI, you don't want to just stop it. You want to, because if you stop it, you're going to have like a rebound effect with the stomach acids. You want to kind of wean down gradually over the course of a few weeks. And then once you're off it, then you can do some like the betaine HCl, and there's a whole protocol I have for that, but it's really a simple process. So really important though.
It's great, man. I love your intelligence around these topics. It's so critical. And your stories, we should have probably talked about your story first. But it's a great story. As far as why you got into this space. So let's share that briefly. Why did you become a doctor? Why are you helping people in this way?
Well, yeah, I mean, so as I was saying before in the golf course, a lot of people in my life were sick for a long time. My brother had cancer when he was 14. I was 12. That was obviously transformative and in a very powerful way, just seeing kind of what he went through and asking a lot of questions of why they're doing certain things, and him going through chemo and radiation, and just seeing like the destruction it had on his body. And like that left a pretty big scar, I think, just for me to kind of like not want people to have to go through that. And then because of that, in my opinion, my parents had tremendous amount of stress, like financial stress, and then just, the stress of just almost losing your child. Like he was on the brink of death. And the cool part of that story was, we were living in Iowa at the time. We moved to Utah. My parents really weren't sure why they were moving to Utah. My dad got a job out there, and it was a big move. And people from Iowa typically don't leave Iowa. Like we kind of stay there. But we left, and it was a big deal. And when we got out there, about a few months being there, brother actually got diagnosed with cancer. And it turns out the doctor that was there was like one of the top 2 specialists in that type of cancer for childhood leukemia, and like was able to, help to save his life. And so again, conventional medical system is not perfect, but it definitely is not completely worthless either. I think if you ever need emergency medical care, like we have the best care in the world. And in my brother's case, it saved his life, and so we're very thankful for that. But there still were consequences as a result of going through chemo and radiation and all that stuff. But and cancer is a whole different conversation. We probably don't have time for today, but we, that kind of spurred it on. But my parents had a bunch of issues. My dad had heart attacks, working 2 full-time jobs all the time, just night and day, working all the time. Had a heart attack when he was like 42. My mom started getting like really debilitating, autoimmune issues. She was like tired all the time, couldn't get out of bed, just like joints were breaking down. And she was only in her 40s. And so all that started happening when I was like end of high school, college years. And so I was just watching this unfold in front of my eyes, and just like, man, like I don't, like this is terrible. Like this is, people shouldn't have to go through this. And
what about your health too?
Yeah, my health was I didn't really know what good health looked like. So I mean, I was an athlete. I played in college, played college basketball, and track, and like I was fit, but I wasn't healthy. You know, like I was like good, like I was strong and all that stuff, and could run for a while, but I wasn't. My guts were all destroyed. I took a bunch of ibuprofen from a back injury that then created a stomach ulcer, and then created more back problems because it was referral pain to my spine for my stomach, and so I was getting bad care from that. My gut health got destroyed. Had some really strong antibiotics and all that stuff, and had chronic pain and chronic fatigue for probably, I don't know, like 10 years until probably I was like 27, 28 years old, 35 now. And it was functional medicine that really started to kind of show me that there was an alternative way to fix this stuff, and met some really cool people and some rotations I was doing that had healed themselves of cancer and different things, and just kind of opened my eyes that there was this alternative world out there that wasn't quackery, because that's what I was told, is like all that stuff is a bunch of quackery and it doesn't work and it's not safe. And when I started seeing that there was real people that solved real problems, I was like, man, like maybe I could fix myself too, and you know, maybe I could go down this road. And so that's what kind of led me down the functional medicine road, even after I got my doctorate, to where I was just like, there's people out there that need real help, and there's actually tools you can use to help them. So I want to learn what those tools are, and yeah, the rest is, as they say, history. But it's still, I mean, I still have so much to learn. Like every day I learn something new. I'm just like, I didn't know that was a thing and that was a factor. And so there's so much to be learned, and that's what makes it fun. No.
Man, so good. So good. Well, let's close it out. What would you say, what's the best way that people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can go to, I'm not sure if you guys do show notes or anything like that.
Yeah.
I have a website that's like, it's like holy.health/discover, where people can like apply to like work with me or things like that. And it's holy like a WH or WHOLLY .health. And so it's kind of a play on words of like just being whole and being holistic. And I also have an ebook that's called Holy Health. You can get a link for that in my my Instagram. You can go dr.austin.lake. Find my Instagram, and you can find it at the top of the page. But otherwise, you can Google my name and probably find stuff. So
yeah,
a bunch of stuff
you blew up on Instagram, almost a million followers on there. That's you provide a lot of good nuggets, just some good insights.
Thanks.
I think people can use to make a difference in their life, because there's so many things that we can do or feel like we need to do to be healthy. Yet I think it's just getting to the basics, and so you provide just really good insights on how one could live a healthy lifestyle.
Cool. Well, thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah, love it. Well, yeah, thanks for being on the show. I had a good time golfing with you today.
Do it again.
Yeah, that was
do it again. We can work on our mastery of that a little bit later.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely working on mine for sure. That's my next thing I will learn to master is golf.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks,
Appreciate you guys.